Hello, this is Michael Rees. Welcome to Ad Hoc, a virtual talk series. I'm a sculptor and new media naut. I'm here to have fun and sharp conversations with some of the smartest people in art, technology, and sculpture. My interests and those of our guests will range far and wide and focus on making and the artist's role in our current era. We'll be talking to artists, curators, designers, and more. Welcome to Ad Hoc. Hey, Chris, hello. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
This is so funny, isn't it?
Yeah, I know.
To be doing these, these little talks. And the talks initially are starting around the book that you're in because you're in the exhibition, Synthetic Cells, Site and Parasite, which we have a few more days. Actually, probably by the time this airs, the show will be over. It will be down.
Yep.
But
For a while.
But welcome. I'm really glad to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having
You're
me.
coming live from your new home in Newburgh, New York, right?
Newburgh, yep.
Yeah, great. You've renovated a place, bought it and renovated it. Yep. That's pretty cool. We've talked a lot about that.
And pre-pandemic, and now
pre-pandemic. Yeah,
it's nice.
And now we're post-pandemic. All right, very good. So, Chris, what I realized a couple of things about the artists that are in Site Parasite. First of all, Ed Winkleman and Murat Razbakov were the two curators of that part of the exhibition. Tom Moran invited them to be the curators. But they chose many of the people that I know because it's a small world, let's face it. Small art world, and it's also a small tech world, and it's even a smaller augmented reality world. And then the other part of that I think is significant is that, but everybody is an academic, meaning they have a job, they teach in another school.
Yeah.
And with a couple of exceptions, I don't know Tomiko very well, and I don't know John Craig Freeman. I know their work and I admire them, but probably you and I have the deepest history together. We've known each other for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think since 2007, probably.
Yeah, 2007, since Rutgers, right?
Yep.
Since Rutgers, we met there, and then, but we also did a project in Germany together, which was which was a lot of fun. That was really a cool thing where we worked with the, I think it was called Transformation.
Yep.
I can't remember the name of that project, but
it was Transformation.
Yeah, Transformation, and we worked with a company that recycled trash. They burned the trash, and then they would filter the air using what was called caulk milk, which they could convert to plaster, and they did, and they made us a bunch of plaster, and we started making sculptures out of all the plaster that this trash company produced. It was really quite an amazing experience, I thought.
Yeah.
I really still think back on that very, very fondly. We made a mess. We made a total mess. And we had an exhibition on Goetzenstrasse in Cologne, or Köln. And we had it on the night of the Long Museum, which almost sounds ominous, like, oh, Jesus, like Kristallnacht or something. But it has nothing ominous about it. It's just they kept the museums open all night, right? 24 hours, I think, people could go into the museums in Cologne. And then our show was up in that little spot, and it was really lovely.
Yeah.
So that was something. And then when I first met you, you were a straight up sculptor, right? You didn't dabble with computers. You didn't do any of that kind of thing, or at least not yet.
I always did, but I never thought of it as connected to my art making.
Right.
I always kind of just thought of it as something else that I'm doing.
It's something else that you were doing. So talk about that a little bit. You mean just like sort of almost educational or
I mean, the funny thing is that I was definitely making art on the computer and I just never thought of it as my art making.
Yeah, isn't
I
that
never I
fascinating?
never put them together. I mean, I was in, I think, Bryce 3D at the time,
Right, right,
you
right,
know, building worlds, building objects, making textures.
right.
I mean, I was always in and
But
out
that
of
takes me back. That takes me back. Bryce
Bryce
3,
3D. Yeah.
Jesus,
Yep. Yeah. I
funny.
think I first started doing that uh, on like the yearbook committee for my high school. We started building some like background images and like sort of landscapes. And I just continued that. And also, Photoshop, Illustrator, that was always part of my working process and like kind of sketching or like thinking through things. But I never connected them. I mean, I think well until after grad school. I was
Yeah,
probably like 2010 or something.
right.
Yeah. Where I started to take it really serious. And I think that was partly because I stopped having a studio, a physical space.
Yeah, good point. Right,
Yeah. I was moving around a lot.
right.
Yeah.
I always posit that conceptualism happened because of the rise in prices of the real estate in New York.
Yeah.
And you didn't have a studio anymore. You couldn't afford it. So thinking up ideas and I mean, I think there's a real element to that. Of course, the art world wants to tell a different narrative, a narrative of purity and
Yes.
intellectual, fortitude and grit and so on. But certainly computers became the studio. Uh,
Hmm.
and the other thing about working with any media is that you've got to develop chops for working in that media. And again, I think that the art world, and I'm really talking about the New York centric gallery conceptual art world,
Hmm.
they really look down on talking about those chops, etc., except when it comes to painters. Painters get to sit around and talk about their, first I layer this in and then I layer that in. And I'm it's always funny to me, and yet we feel the need on some level to justify the existence of using computers, which control every aspect of our lives.
Yep.
Every aspect of our lives at this point.
Yep.
Somehow, this is a weird issue that we're working with. Have you felt that, haven't you? You felt a little
Oh, yeah.
prejudice against your media.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's also, yeah, it took me a long time to start really taking those things serious because I think coming from a fine art background and having sort of that attitude of digital media or the computer or technology being somehow outside of what it means to have a studio practice or an art practice and
Right.
really, build a process that isn't just physical, and feeling okay with doing that.
Again, you were always, and you continue to be, but especially in the early days when you were
Yeah.
making and using computers to make, you always realized sculptures. There were always, you love to build. I
Yeah.
mean, this is what from the outside, that's what I perceived, that you really
Yes.
were very engaged in the process and the technique. You love you love the little nitty gritty problem solving issues of sculpture.
Hmm.
Um, and you've done large scale sculpture a lot, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the tech, I mean, I'm just looking at everything as a tool now. I don't really care if I'm on the computer or not.
Yeah, right.
Um, but the computer, I think about affordances a lot. Which medium affords me to be able to do certain things that I wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
Right. Right.
So, like, working in a virtual space, I think it comes with a lot of affordances that you just aren't able to do in the physical world. And then also, as far as like production or fabrication too, I think
Yeah.
there's a lot that affords you that you wouldn't have in any other way, really.
Yeah, and those
And then,
industrial, yeah, excuse me.
sorry, yeah. So those affordances, I think, also open up new ways of thinking about object making or making space, and that's kind of where I find myself residing a lot of the time. I didn't know it in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now it's more of a conscious effort in those spaces.
And to be able to have the same kind of tools that engineers and large scale companies and all these sorts of things have to manifest their products. And to be able to have access to those things, I think is kind of an important thing for us as sculptors. I mean, we're outside of that manufacturing stream typically,
Yep.
and have been for a long time. And to be able to connect and use it in, kind of a personal, subjective, artistic process is very powerful, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's entered the consciousness of the culture. And so it makes a lot of sense that we would use that stuff in work,
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to play with those processes and those systems in
Yeah.
a way that maybe they weren't built for.
Yeah.
I think where an artist really comes in and does something odd with it.
Now, tell me, do you really think that we do something outside of the parameters of how a tool has been engineered? I always debate this in my own mind. I'm not trying to stick it to you, but
Yeah.
do artists really have this novel imagination that other human beings just don't possess?
I don't know if they don't possess it. I think it's much more of a practical way, or the tool is made for a very practical thing. It's made for a specific purpose. And I think artists tend to come in and see what other ways it could be used, or they have an ability to kind of come in and think about maybe the limits of it, or how it would break and how it might break that then affords you something else.
Right.
And then what can you do with that?
Right.
So I think they're positioned in a way that they are looking at tools or technology in a way that those tools and technology aren't necessarily built or conceived of.
Yeah. So, I mean, that sparks my imagination, and I want to ask you a bunch of further questions about it. But I also feel like it's important to talk too. You were about technology and talked about augmented reality. And
Sure.
sort of yesterday with Claudia Hart, we spent a lot of time talking about how sculpture and cinema are so close together that and it's closer together than, say, painting and cinema or photography and cinema even.
Mm-hmm.
And but you made a transition, and you were one of the founding members of Manifest AR, isn't that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in 2010.
2010.
Yeah.
And so you guys got together and you wrote a manifesto. Boom.
We did. We put our stake in the ground.
And that's kind of an amazing thing. It's out there on the web, and you can look it up and read about it, and read about all the work that was done with augmented reality. When it was burgeoning, when augmented reality was very difficult to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably without a huge backpack system that was probably like 50 grand and your own network connection, or something very complicated, something that could be in someone's pocket, which basically happened because of the iPhone.
Right.
It had position, had gyroscope, it had data coming to it. So it was the first time that it was accessible in that way. And it was difficult, and it was clunky, and it was hard, and it didn't always work.
Yeah, but I think that you guys, the whole group of you, and also individually, every one of the artists that are involved in Manifest AR are still working today, still doing a lot of projects with AR, et cetera. You guys were hashing out and working out the possibilities for using this technology in an artistic manner. With certainly there's a kind of a framework of the critical about the work that's done with Manifest AR. There were a lot of political pieces that were done. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of pieces that were critical of the museum that were done. Mm-hmm. I mean, you guys really hashed out a big territory to imagine how AR could be used and worked with, right?
We did. And I think a lot of those projects dealt directly with space and sort of ownership of space.
Right.
And sort of taking back or reclaiming some of that space with this, additional layer on top of everything. Right. Because, and still, there's not really any ownership of that space. You're really deciding to view this additional layer. So it's not something that's regulated. I don't know if it ever will be. Um, but I
Be
think,
awfully difficult to regulate it.
yeah, I mean, unless there's like a large public channel that is somehow just default in view for everyone, it would be imposing if you put something there.
This is, well, but look how difficult it is to regulate Facebook, for example,
Yeah.
and get Facebook to comply to any, sense of whatever. Let's not go there. Let's not do that. But the interesting thing is that, as AR starts to move into some of those platforms,
Yeah.
which are already established, there may be there may be a little bit more censorship or control, some possibility of control, whereas we're still in the Wild West days, because you can develop something by Unity and you can deliver it to anybody who has the skill to get that app on their phone or tablet, which in some cases can be easy or in some cases can be difficult.
Yeah, I think that's why, unless it's something that is sort of a default channel that we're viewing through, that's just, maybe as ubiquitous as like just having an iPhone is, like,
Right.
or as utilitarian as like it becomes something that you have to be kind of be part of contemporary world. And if you're always on a particular channel, a public channel of some kind, I think then that could eventually become a regulated space. But right now you're either on a standalone app like in the show, or you're in an app on a channel that you decide to go and view something on. Um, so there's not any regulation of that at all, and
Yeah.
I don't
Right.
see that being regulated.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Except in the big bubble sense. And again, this is kind of a political thing, and it gets outside of the realm of what we want to talk about today. But we're still in their world. We're still on their platform. It's not our platform. It's still an iPad. It's still an iPhone. It's still, and we sort of take all of that stuff for granted. And they're still tracking us. They're still, all the things they're doing. But talk a little bit more. So, was it an easy transition for you to start working in AR? I mean, 2010 is a little bit early to get into AR, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I mean, you were already doing things with doing computer design that you then would realize through, say, milling machines or 3D printers or anything like that. You were doing a lot of that work, an awful lot of that work.
Yeah.
And then, was it an easy transition to get into AR? Was it immediately apparent to you that AR carried with it these affordances that you referred to before?
Yeah, I mean, I think the affordances, the transition was the transition was easy in the sense that I didn't have a lot of options at the time. I was bouncing, I was going from residency to residency. I started building and working on the computer a lot more, and I really had no way of getting that work out into the world. I had like very minimal resources. I couldn't really afford to mill a huge sculpture.
Yeah.
So the platform that I had built, the Virtual Public Art Project, really came in as a way to get that work out into the world in a way that I thought was, this kind of at a scale that I thought was interesting, instead of, something that at the time maybe I would only be able to make something temporary that I'd have to kind of take apart or throw away. So the platform and AR really let me place my objects all around the world in really different scales and engage with a much larger audience, and also in a way that I hadn't really done before. And I
So
think
your first AR project was Virtual Public Art Project.
yes.
And
Yeah.
so just give us a little bit of a description of what that was and
Sure.
what you did with it.
Yeah. So the Virtual Public Art Project was a platform that I started to host virtual sculptures at the time, at site-specific locations, sort of like what Pokemon Go is now.
Yeah.
But in 3D, so you could actually walk around the objects.
That's
So you had to physically be present to access that object.
Mhm.
And that was really interesting to me, at the time and still now, in the state of the world that we are now, where I can send you a file of my object and you could look at it or open it on your phone now, or anything like that. But to kind of have someone leave their desk, go out into the world to a location to engage with this object that's not physically there, and then access it through their phone, through this kind of magic window, and physically walk around it and walk up to it. That those ideas and that way of working, I think it really gave me something to grab into as far as like conceptually making things in that space. And then also having the platform and starting to invite other artists into that space and really start to talk about those ideas and then see how they're approaching that, because it was a new language. It was like it wasn't really developed yet. It was actually really hard to show people the work. You would show, I mean, even now, I think this tends to happen. You would physically, you hold the device up, you show them what they're looking at, and they almost couldn't even see it.
Mm.
You had to
Yeah.
you had to
They were
move.
blind. They were
Yeah,
almost blind, right?
yeah. You had to move them. You had
Yeah.
to walk with them.
Yeah.
It
Right.
would take a minute or two, and then it would snap in, and then they kind of understand, and then they really explore it with the phone. So that, I think being in that space and kind of trying to create something that was more challenging, of a way of or new, sort of a nascent way of approaching sculpture,
But then
and
you
also
also,
talking about it as sculpture,
yeah, right. And
like
public
not
sculpture for that matter.
and public sculpture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Having all the historical baggage that comes with public sculpture and all that stuff. And yet at the same time, Chris, you were acting, not only were you, not only did you do projects, I think you did virtual public art projects yourself, right?
I did the first one,
But you
and then
also curated projects and
yeah.
gathered people together and put them in specific locales, worked with other museums and institutions. In other words, you behaved a little differently than an artist per se. You expanded the role of the artist.
Yeah, I mean, I was curating and directing,
Mhm.
almost like a gallery or like a small museum would,
Right,
in a way. Yeah.
right.
Yep.
And putting together ideas about what could, should, might, some investigative subject-based, focus, right?
Yeah, I think later it started to have more of that throughout the shows. I think in the beginning it was really just an exploration of the medium and really just kind of figuring it out,
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's interesting that um, these technologies have at their core a kind of egalitarian potential. And that egalitarian potential is that we don't have to accept the art platforms as given. We don't have to accept the museum as given. We don't have to accept the gallery as given. We can explore, and particularly, or for that matter, we don't have to accept a city government as the primary permitter of digital experiences or public experiences, that there could be this little leak that could happen outside of, and then egalitarian in the sense that it's just you think it's a good idea, you organize the whole thing, you're self-organizing basically. And do you think that that is the nature of our time and our dissatisfaction with institutions and the way institutions work? Or do you think it's more an affordance of the technology and more an affordance of the technology?
I think it's more of an affordance of the technology.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think the tech, yeah, the tech is allowing for that space to exist, in a way I don't think would be able to without it, or, yeah. So I don't know. It might be of the time as well, but I tend to think that the technology itself is really allowing it.
All right.
Yeah.
See, that's a very interesting question. I it's sort of a chicken and the egg question. You know, the fact is that these tendencies both arrive here now at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And maybe one sparked the other, but it really doesn't matter in a sense because they're both here now.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. And then you also did the MetroCard project. What was the title of that project? And talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that actually that was fairly short-lived, and
Ah,
then that eventually turned into what is Activator now.
Activator, right,
Yeah.
right, Activator.
So MetroCard was a platform that I started um, that was using the New York City MetroCard as an image target to then host uh, artist works on top of. You were the first artist on that.
That's right. I forgot that. Yeah, that's right. I love that. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and shortly after launching it, well, so first, I mean, the idea was that there's I don't know however many million Metro cards in someone's pocket, and at the time, augmented reality wasn't really be able to do a lot with world tracking. So looking at the world and placing objects into it, sort of where we're at now.
Right.
So a lot of it was image based, which some of it, the image based, is in the show as well.
Meaning that the image is a target that activates the augmented reality experience.
Yeah, so some virtual content gets stuck to that image.
Right.
So using the Metro card as the image, there was that many million images ready to be pulled out of someone's pocket and interacted with.
Right.
And the idea was that every month that the work would change. Shortly after launching it, actually Apple purchased Mateo, which was the software that I was developing with.
I hated that. Oh, that made me so mad. Oh, that
Yeah.
made me so mad.
So they bought Mateo, that development kit, and they shut it down. And if you had a project running on that, it was basically terminated.
Gone.
Yeah.
Gone.
And that turned into AR Kit, which is now part of the iPhone, and all its augmented reality capabilities comes from Mateo. So, but that eventually turned into what is Activator, which was a monthly app platform to host artist projects. There was 3 artist projects a month. It ran for about 12 months straight, and I'm moving it to a quarterly system soon. And those projects ranged from games, procedural projects, AR projects. There was videos in there. There were some playable projects in there as well. And yeah, so I think to date there's been about 40 artists on the platform.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing. 40. You've hosted 40 artists on the platform. That's quite amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really something.
Yeah, so it's been cataloged, and I'm in the process of updating it and doing it more, like I said, on a quarterly basis. Doing it every month.
Do you feel a little bit of conflict having been pulled? In some ways, you obviously thought this was a great idea because you spent, 40 artists and interacting, developing, working with, making a platform for artists. That's tough. That's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of bureaucratic work. It's just technical kinds of things, but you're realizing a vision at the same time. Do you feel a kind of a conflict between your artistic self and this other sort of more curatorial persona?
No, I don't think they're in conflict. I think it's just two sides of the way I think about making. I think that more like my curatorial side of my work, I kind of want to make the things I want to see in the world exist.
Right.
And I think even if they're not, like Virtual Public Art Project ran for about 4 years. I think we had, I don't know, I had over 100 artists on there. Activator's been almost 2 years now. We have like 40 artists on there. I like to think that even just starting those projects and really letting other artists come in and kind of work in that space, I think that radiates out. And I think that helps build sort of the community and the ways of thinking and ways of making that I kind of want to be in the world doing myself.
Yeah, see, I think that's one of the things that's so fascinating about what digital media affords us. It does afford us these communities that are they're alternative communities. They're not. Once again, the museums certainly have done projects. They've certainly picked this up a little bit, but they're also very engrossed in their multi-billion-dollar real estate projects, and they're engrossed in their and somehow wrapped up in the value of works of art and their board of directors and it allows us to go into a new sandbox and play as seriously and as large as we would any other way,
Yep.
and you really have created a platform for a lot of people. That's kind of amazing action. I mean, I think of some other people have done similar things, like Alfredo Salazar
Yep.
has made the Demoda, for example. That'd be another example of this kind of thing. And I realized talking to you now that what you did was, in some sense, the basis or the inspiration for me inviting. I always, when I started this project, I knew always that I wanted to have a show within a show.
Yeah.
And so what you did was very much a precursor. And, I've been with you, I've been watching you all the way and been talking with you about it all the way.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of amazing to see all of these things kind of twine and do whatever. I mean, I love the idea. I mean, I think as artists, I don't think artists naturally imagine themselves as being inside institutions. We don't,
No.
we don't think, I'm a MoMA kind of guy. I'm a MoMA kind of artist. I think we always think we're on the outside, and that, and we always feel that, maybe a little misunderstood, or certainly overlooked, or whatever, what have you. And yet we have so much happening, and there's so much rich territory that goes on between artists as they discuss their work and discuss possibilities and all these kinds of things. And this allows us to grow that community without the imprimatur of, I mean, it sort of appeals to that rebellious quality, which is, I'm on the outside, which I've never met an artist that didn't have that feeling. I maybe there's some artists that I don't know, but I never met an artist that felt they were, in the fold.
Yeah.
It always feels like we have to fight to be in the fold. And
Yeah. I think that's also maybe just, I don't know, at least for myself, it's more of a comfortable place to be, just because I feel like it's at least a more interesting place to be for me.
Yeah.
To be outside of it and not to be sort of, constrained. I kind of want to set my own constraints.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And yet, someday, I mean, I always say this to my students, someday, if you're lucky enough or whatever, the big boy, the big media, the big people, big boys, big girls, they'll show up and say, you're the one, you're good, we'll take you. Kind of what happened with Moby and the electronic music scene. I mean, everybody knows Moby, but they don't know, mainstream knows Moby, but they don't know the rich relationships and, characteristics and connections that scene had, unless they're real fanatics, unless they're really committed to it. And most people just like, oh, there's Moby. I love that song. So it's
this kind of reminds me of what you were saying in the beginning, or it just brought up this idea that everyone in the show is an academic of some kind.
Yeah.
And I think in some way, I mean, doing this kind of work, we really need some other way of living and existing. There's not AR artists who are living off their AR artwork.
Yeah, right.
Like maybe a painter, or even like a more traditional sculptor could do.
Well, if you wanted to do commercial projects, there wouldn't, there'd be no end of work, I think. Yeah. But the thing, and by the way, that's something that artists do all the time. They develop an expertise that is valuable within that commercial, commercial industrial advertising domain, and they develop that expertise, and then primarily it's a strategy for getting hold of the tools.
Yep.
But that's a brutal world. That's it. The jobs aren't always there. It's all freelance. There's nobody helping you. They want your expertise. They want this thing that you spend hundreds and hundreds of hours developing. That's why academia has kind of got a special spot, because you're not beholden to those brutal schedules and those, you have a sort of stability as you pursue these expensive and complicated projects that demand a lot of knowledge and a lot of skill, to pull off. So, Chris, let's get to talking about some of the works that you did in Synthetic Cells, Site, and Parasite.
Sure.
You had, I felt like your work, lots of people did lots of different things. There wasn't a theme for the augments. Yeah. It was sort of like more like possibilities, more freedoms that were being offered for people to experience. But you had a very specific approach that was sort of phenomenal, I might even say. And by the way, feel free. It's set up that if you wanted to show some images or something, that you could share the screen. I don't think I ever got images of your work onto my website, so I don't have any images of your work. But you might want to just describe what you did and how it worked, and you had sound, for example. And
yeah, I could also, let me see.
Sorry, I should have prepared you for this.
No, it's fine.
We just have some images lined up for this.
I can share. I'll share my website. There's some work on there that's definitely related to the projects in the show. So the works in the show came off of a series of works that I've been making now for, I don't know, maybe like 5 or 6 years. So this was the first actual version of it, which was a public sculpture in Kingston, New York. And it came from this idea. I was kind of doing some research on mirrors and reflections, and I had written down only as beautiful as the objects it reflects.
So there's two things. First of all, say your web address so people can go and visit.
Oh, sure. It's ChristopherManzione.com.
Okay.
Yep.
And there it is right there on the screen so people can see that. And then the second thing is point out the mirror.
Sure.
Image. It's very, it's hard to see.
So here's the sculpture up on top here. You can see a reflection of, she's down here. And let me just show a couple more images. I have a short video too. So it's a two-sided, very sort of polygonal object, and it's splitting your view, and it's kind of directing each side of the object to the sides of the sculpture. So, the idea here was really that sort of looking onto the surface of this object, you're not really looking at the object itself, you're looking at its environment. And that the object itself can only be as beautiful as its surrounding, as its environment. Right. So this was the first sort of version of this concept, this idea. And I'll let this just play real quick. There's some sound here.
You know what? For some reason, the sound does not come through on Vimeo. But if you wanted to put the sound in later, we can do it.
Sure.
Or we're thinking about it. We're trying to figure out how to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. You've done quite a few mirrored pieces, if memory serves.
I have, yeah. I'm going to go back now. Yeah, I have some older works with Mylar. I also have this performance piece that I did at Socrates Sculpture Park. This was originally done up in Maine at Skowhegan Residency. And hold on a second here. So I spent about 3 hours in the park sort of going into positions and holding still and waiting till people would come and go. Is a sculpture park, so I kind of seemed like an object in the park, and then I would kind of suddenly move and take a new position. And this was way before I actually started the series of works for Only as Beautiful as the Object That Reflects. But there's definitely a thread of a connection here. I was definitely trying to kind of take on the texture or or the coloring of the environment and become the sculpture.
This kind of reminds me a little bit of Mudman, Kim Jones, you know, that
Sure.
Vietnam vet guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of a makeup artist, but different.
Yep.
Different.
And then, so the work directly in the show comes mostly from these objects. These were 3D scans I was taking from different parts of the landscape. This is a boulder out actually from Boulder, Colorado. And at the same time as I was taking the scan of the object, I was taking a 360 image of the environment. And then afterwards, I would bring the scan data in to the computer. I would put the 360 image around it, and then I would bake the reflection of the environment onto the object. So these are just prints, but they also exist as 3D prints, full color 3D prints. And this work, and some of these objects I think are actually in the show too, synthetic cells.
By prints, you mean 3D prints, right? Or do you mean two-dimensional prints?
What we're looking at now are 2D prints,
okay,
renders, and there are 3D prints of these as well. I don't know if I have any images of them at the moment.
And then that are then coated with a mirror paint or something like that.
No, so sorry, no. So the color, the surface color gets actually printed. The reflection of the environment is the surface color of the 3D print.
I see.
So it's a full color 3D print with basically what you're seeing here on the object.
Great.
So it looks reflective, but it's reflecting a different environment.
And Chris, that was done with a digital technology that you didn't apply that color by hand after the fact. It was printed into the part.
Yes.
Technically.
Yeah. So what you're seeing here are renders of the objects reflecting the environment, and the same color gets baked into the object itself. So when it gets 3D printed in full color, the reflections are on there just like you're seeing here.
Nice.
Yeah. So this same idea.
Do you have any pictures of the objects?
I don't think
I've ever seen the objects.
Yeah, I don't. I can try to find. I don't have them on my website. I can try to find them though.
Okay.
So, yeah. So
how did this move into the work that you did with at Grounds for Sculpture?
Sure. So it's basically, so I took the same idea and same way of working here. And from the images that you gave me, I think there were 6 or 7 target images from your sculptures.
Right.
Each sculpture, I kind of took the texturing or some part of the image and made a new object. I think I actually took one of the boulders from this project, and I made it basically a real-time reflection. So what you're seeing gets stuck to your sculptures are different objects from my scanned library with a reflective texture on them. And then depending on the image you gave me, I chose an environment, a 360 image, to be around that mirrored object. But you don't see that environment. You only see it through the reflection on the object itself. And then I paired that with some audio that matched or was closely matched with that environment. So I have this cabinet of curiosities that you see in the work in the show. That's reflecting a 360. I think it's actually a 360 video of a carnival that I took, and you're also hearing the carnival at the same time. So you're actually looking into this cabinet to try to glean some kind of information, some color information about this virtual space that's around you that you can't see. So you're actually looking onto the object to kind of understand its environment. And I like the idea that you're looking onto an object to try to understand its surrounding instead of really, your focus is almost not on the object anymore. It's more about its environment and where it's coming from.
And yet the object is present in a very stealthy way. It's almost like these are camouflaged objects that don't want to reveal themselves in a way.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the focus on the reflection, you're almost not looking at the object.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then one of the pieces in the show, there's one image that's sort of this black and white striped, sort of like dazzled texture. And that one, I took the actual image you gave me and made that the environment for it. And the audio on that is it's called a barber's pole. So it's this auditory hallucination. So it sounds like it's endlessly getting louder and louder and louder. But it's not. It's just staying at constant volume. And that one, that's the only oddball out of the group, really.
You mean because of its use of sound?
Use of sound, and it's not the environment isn't coming from a real world location.
Oh, I see. Well, it is in a way, isn't it? Isn't it coming? Well, I mean, it's not uses the artwork.
It's not collected. So like all the other objects, like the ones you see here, are scanned from an actual object in the world, and all the images for their environments are taken from real world locations too. The other one,
that one's the most abstract. It's taken out of the world. It's not in the world. It's out of the world. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, very good. Well, your participation in the show was fantastic, and you really met the challenge. You did an AR piece for every single target, and I thought that was awesome. I was really grateful to that, and really, really wonderful. I think, I don't know if I've told this story or told you this story, but I think the show is kind of spoke to people in a very intimate kind of way. And the evidence of that for me is that one time I was in there and I saw this mother and her two kids, and they were going around and they were experiencing every individual AR, right? They would stand and they'd say, okay, let's go to the next one. Let's go to the next one. Let's go to the next one. And I think they'd been there maybe at least a couple of times because they really knew how to navigate the software.
Yeah.
And I felt that they had missed something, right? And so I said, hey, excuse me, I wanted to be I wanted to make sure they had the full experience or something like that. I said, excuse me, and all three of them turned and looked at me and their jaws dropped like, how dare you interrupt us in the middle of this experience? Because this is much more important than anything you have to say. And I thought that was a profound lesson for me. Yeah. That was really a valuable and about people growing and developing their own celebratory experiences around phenomena that we're developing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, listen, man, this has been a wonderful chat, and I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for being in the show, and thank you for being in the catalog. We have the catalog here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been
amazing. And then it's been lovely speaking with you and learning a little bit more about what you're up to. Oh, do you have any new projects that you're working on? Any new things you're heading towards?
I do. I don't have much to show, but
no, just maybe give us a place to look for you in the future.
Sure. My website is a great place to look, chrismanzione.com.
Okay, good.
I'm working on a VR project now with an artist, Barnett Cohen in LA, and we're developing this sort of non-linear VR experience that will be partly like procedurally generated.
Right.
So it's not something you can watch once and get a sense for. It's something you'll actually be able to watch endless amounts of times and never have the same experience.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Procedural animation is really so fascinating. There's a lot of, yeah, so fascinating. So, all right. Sorry
Yep.
about that.
No,
Sorry,
no
got
worries.
a little.
No worries.
But anyway, very good. Chris, thanks so
Yeah.
much again today. And I really
Thank
appreciate the time. And
Thanks.
we'll talk again soon.
Okay.
Take care, man.
Bye.
Bye-bye.